Hey, what's happening, all you beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode of The Strange Road. I'm Mikey. This is Bub. Bub, how you doing today?
Great.
You good?
Yeah.
You ready for this one? The stoke level is quite high. I will admit. I've been chatting with our guest in WhatsApp. Our guests are coming all the way from Europe. One of our guests is coming to us from England, and the other guest is coming to us from Portugal. Guys, This is going to be a fantastic episode, and we have so many things that we're trying to do and different people we're trying to bring on. And Bub actually found our guests on Twitter. So shout out to Bub. And also big shout out to Stoner and Disborough is back, everybody, in Master Control.
Right.
And
there it is.
We've been waiting for Disborough to come back and grace the Brozone's presence. He's been hustling.
We've been missing him.
Working, doing on sound location, tons of gigs. So much love to Disborough. Welcome back, dude. I know Stoner's missed you in there.
It just feels like the Brozone is full on energy.
Right.
And we got Rollo here. We've got,
we got Rollo in Master Control in studio today. And we have two little guests that hopefully are very quiet while we're doing this.
They're being great.
All right, guys, let's bring in our guests. Please welcome to the Strange Road, Archaeoacoustics researchers from the Institute for Natural Philosophy and Ancient Past Research Center, Ricardo Calvário Phillip Corbett. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the Strange Road.
Thank you very much, guys. It's really an honor for us to be here. I'm Ricardo, and you have a great show, so we are very excited to be with you guys for this afternoon. I will let my colleague introduce himself.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Phil from the Ancient Alternative View. I co-own the Institute for Natural Philosophy. Ricardo and I have been working together for over 3 years, boots on ground, through a team that I've owned for over 10 years, based on physical evidence and boots on ground research worldwide and globally, where we've produced the catalogue, an A to Z catalogue that produces physical evidence that shows a specific set of engineers that spanned our Earth that left these hallmarks behind. And we've just written a paper, Ricardo and I, called The Statement of Significance on the Global Hallmarks. But what a pleasure to be here with you this evening, and thank you very much for having me. It's an honor.
Oh, pleasure's all ours, Phil, Ricardo. We appreciate. I know it's been a little bit to try to get this episode done. You guys are 5 hours ahead of us,
right?
And it's just been a little bit of trying to line up schedules. So we really appreciate you guys making the time, really. And how did you guys get into this type of research? And can you just kind of lay the foundation a little bit and give our guests kind of a, about the paper and the institute and what you guys are focusing on, kind of overarching theme?
So it was a conjunction of synergies, because I was not aware of the physical hallmarks that are 15 of the 17, 18 that we have marketed so far. And it was a matter of fate, of luck, whatever you want to call it, because I've been researching by myself for, 25 years, seriously. I started with religious studies. Religious studies led me to questions that made me go to mythology. Mythology led questions that led me to history. With all of that, I did several courses on astronomy. I started to try and link all this and collect as much information as I could. Then came the internet. I could start accessing much more material. I started creating a library that is now at the service of the Institute and open to everyone. I have about 300,000 between books and papers. Most of them are books, because papers I'm collecting for only 5, 6, 7 years for now. So all books, there is no novels, it's all data. Every single book that it's on those 296,000, it's everything, but it's only data. So, and I then found X. I started to post papers and sharing books, started to share opinions, and I was lucky enough to be found by one of the members of the team of Phil. that related me to Phil. Phil entered in contact with me. I link what I thought I knew with what he and his team had been digging for many times, as he will explain for sure, for many years. And it was just like two things that were meant to happen, because all that I had researched on telluric energies, on the structure of the mineralogy, the use of the sites itself, they were purposeful, they were intentional. That's not something that, as academics tell us, that they done the place and then they found out that the place could do this or that. So that makes no sense, because it implies bringing stones from 200 kilometers away. Implies a specific place where we know today we can measure that that's where the lines cross. That's exactly the site. That's why we see all the what we can call today the cargo cults that use that same technology. They took possession of the sites, like the Christian community, or well, all the religions did the same, but we saw it on our field, on our land, that the Vatican took over the pagan sites, built first something in top of there, then expanded until gathered the knowledge, and then started creating cathedrals that are in fact machines that control this resonance, that have their own tune and so on. And all of this is academic. Nothing of this is woo-woo. So to make what is already long short, it was a conjunction of the stars, because our information joined perfectly. And that's how the paper eventually came out, because I said we have to do something with this. So there's something, we have to go outside and see people and do the testing on sites. We have to make people aware of this and see what they have to say to us about this, because if you don't think about something, you're not going to get any answer. So if we bring the information out and people start debating about these subjects, more things there is more things that we can learn from them, including that's the idea of the Institute. Everyone is welcome. There is no idea that we say it's wrong, because we're not saying we are right. We just want to hear everybody and combine all that information, something that can be useful and for practical purposes, because we think that these sites have a function that was lost. To us, at least, the technology was not lost, but the intention, the initial intention. Because if you go 4,000 BC, what you find in anthropology and archaeology is that communities, for instance, where I live in Iberia, France, England, it was idyllic communities where everything they found is there was so many hunt to be done. There's so many animals. The animals were docile. There was vegetation, incredibly amounts. Everything was productive. And that was all because of this technology of the stones and the implementation of the stones on the ground and so on, and the use of these energies that produced that. When you had that cataclysm, be it 3000 BC or 4000 or 5000 BC, when you pass from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, all of that was gone suddenly. So whatever happened eradicated those communities. Those sites were no longer functional. They start building on hilltops. They start to fortifying. They start to protect what they have, when there was no such a thing. It's the shaman lose the ruling of the community, and now we have chieftains and people that fight, and the shaman is put aside because he's no longer the most important of the community. He's the strongest that can defend them, because when you don't have resources, you start fighting among for those that have. So and again, I made it longer than I wished, but that's how we combine our energy. Sorry, Phil. I will let the word to you.
No. This is great. This is great. But awesome. I just want everybody to know, and I don't know if that was just, I want to make sure that it's clear what you got when you're saying sites, guys. These are ancient sites, ancient temple complexes all over the world.
Exactly.
These guys are out there trying to, rediscover these techniques that I've experienced myself at Chichen Itza, at the Temple of Kukulkan, when you clap your hands, the jungle bird sound of It's like ew, ew, ew. And so these kind of sound features that, we'll get into some of this, but hypergeums, there's so many things that I've been so obsessed with. A lot of weird things in Malta, the Darren Kuru, there's all these different places that have these sound chambers, and And so that's what we're talking about here, guys. And Phil, if you want to hop in here and just give us a little bit of, maybe we can kind of start going down that path and leading us down to what you guys have discovered.
Well, over a period of around 10 years, I've been putting together a set of global physical ancient hallmarks that really fit into an A to Z of every single ancient site worldwide. It isn't just Peru, Egypt, India, Greece. Those are sort of the four main study points of anybody that speaks about the ancient world, but they're not the only ancient sites. Let's make that very clear. So we started to categorize these physical evidence elements that basically show a set of hallmarks that engineers would go around the world and follow on really from ground level. And what they were looking at was, like every ancient site was built on a river bend. Let's make that very clear. Why everywhere needed water, but why did it need water? It wasn't just for us. What we are seeing in these ancient sites, and a lot of them, if we look at them, predominantly didn't have anywhere that you or I would go to the toilet, number one. So it wasn't directly for us. There were functional aspects within them. And when you look underneath what would be now what's built over the top of these rooms and corridors where the water are, they're specifically the mineralogies that we use. I mean, you've spoken about hypogeums. You get the Cephalini hypogeum in Malta. Well, this is made out of limestone. So what you've got to look at is the density of the limestone and the room sizes and actually what was going on in that specific hypogeum, which would vary to other hypogeums. So we started documenting these global hallmarks, and I'll have to give you some background on that. I'm an AEM All Arms Marine Commando by trade. I travelled the world as an engineer and gained my degree in helicopter engineering and fixed-wing engineering. And I've been to places all over the world now, and I'm very lucky to have sat an historical degree where, off my own back, where finding these, let's say, hallmarks and disparities that, let's be honest, they've been researched, they've been looked at, they've been categorized, but they weren't categorized on a global scale. They were looked at on a one-site basis where, look, like we've said, there's an A to Z of ancient sites. And if you're going to corroborate evidence, and my current job at the moment, I'm a close protection officer that works in intelligence analytics. And I've designed a team of ancient specialists over the last 10 years, Ricardo being one of them, that literally have different skill sets, and we go globally, boots on ground, and gain different interpretations of what the photographs, what the sites are, the academic papers have led to through their research, which seemingly gives you a data set and an answer without them giving you an answer, which of course they're not going to be able to, because it would affect money. And academically in archaeology and science, this is the ongoing war, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Well, with the institute that Ricardo and I brought forward when we wanted to build this institute from ground up, what we wanted was a place for free thinkers with all ideas like Ricardo touched on when he introduced himself, where people's ideas are not shunned, where, like yourself, where you where you had experiences in Chichen Itza where the clapping was like the birds. Well, what if we were using other examples where, for argument's sake, hypogeums, if you used a bull roarer and specific sounds, we're using mineralogies of stone to cause vibrations, and those vibrations, using the mineralogy of stone, could cause different effects within these rooms. Now, Ricardo and I have done a series of spaces on Twitter over, well, it was our first 8 or 9 weeks, wasn't it, after opening the institute, and it's all on Archaeoacoustics. And we've found places that use different mineralogies of stone. So let's make this clear, quartzite being the prevalent factor within that. And what quartzite allows is not just piezoelectricity effects, it allows frequency effects to be adjusted. And what can you do if you can adjust frequency? You can manipulate how it's amplified what channeling effect it's actually played on exactly, what wavelengths used. So if one thing might affect you differently than me, let's just say this to anybody that's listening. We've all got that tune out there that can make us cry, whether it's because a loved one might have died or whatever. We've all got that tune that will make us, yeah, we want to get up in the morning, we want to get out. Well, that in effect is giving you a feeling of awe and a feeling of fear. It's making you not like that tune, or it's making you love that tune. Well, you've got different sounds in the ancient world that were played through these hypogeums and through the mineralogies of stone that were played on a level that you may or may not have heard, that would have affected how you were within that community, and protected on the outside of that by more cyclopean stone. It might not have just been for defensive purposes. No, to amplify sound. So we've looked at ancient history in its entirety, and one of the biggest ports of call through the wars, and I've looked at all the wars progressing backwards, of course, is Alexander the Great. Now, one of the biggest things that Alexander the Great said was, from the end of the New Road to Macedonia, he could pass a message on horseback he could do it in 7 days. So every 11 minutes on horseback, a message could be passed. Could we have misinterpreted that? Could it have been the temples? Quite easily could have been the temples. And isn't it easier to pass a message verbally if the mineralogies of stone were communicable all the way down that new road across the Mediterranean? Now, you might think that I'm absolutely mad saying that, but Rick and I mapped it.
Not at all.
They're well within that 11-mile gap. They're well within, which we've looked at in our research, which mineralogies of stone, aren't they, Rick? They seem to work best on communication, to amplify out of hypogeums. You might hear something outside, but within a room, you're hearing something different. That's language orientation. So if it's very close, maybe they could change things like language and so on. But actual communication, so sound, ball roarer, say you needed to get a mass message back very quickly and you'd infiltrated these temples, I think you could do it that way. And you could certainly get very educated messages a long way, very quick. And that doesn't take communication out of the research at all. In fact, using different mineralogies and these hallmarks, could you not have used different ways to communicate? Language orientation, learning and teaching. It could have been a way to keep people with you, not against you, to allow people in, to come for learning. We also read that Herodotus went and learned with the Egyptian pharaohs. Was he given permission to? Egypt, of course, it had water going through it. Of course, it's got different mineralogies of stone. So could the internal workings of the Great Pyramid, where you've got the portcullis, you've got the nubs, and they would have been working, there's attributes of water all underneath through different tunnels, and there's papers been written on base notes that actually would have gone up to 900 kilometers away, which funnily enough is like the stones are being transported. So could mineralogy against mineralogy, magnetism against magnetism, could you have just pushed the stone down?
Right.
And well, exactly. At the end of the day, alchemical science could have been completely different than what we know now. And if sound and frequency are an applicable factor in the original build, we have to rethink our thought processes, guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Absolutely.
like the story of Easter Island, how the Moai walked themselves into place. You know, that to me, that always sounded like some kind of sound or some kind of technology that, you know, you're able to harmonize and resonate these stones to where, like you said, maybe you could just push them into place. Ricardo?
Yeah. Just think about this. You have already seen everyone's seen that. Someone singing to a crystal glass and breaking it, right? You've seen it.
Oh, so, yeah.
It's okay. So just think the fraction of seconds exactly before the crystal breaks. Have you seen footage in high slow motion?
Yeah, where the glass actually waves. Yeah. It's wild.
Sound can make physical objects into some sort of GUI.
I see what you're
More
saying.
malleable.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Which
If
is
you-
why in
you hit-
the Inca, it looks like those ancient, huge. It looks like they were almost molded into place. Some of those stones
Yes.
that you can barely
What,
fit.
the 11-sided stone?
Yeah, where they're just, it's like, and then you mentioned the nubs too, Phil. And I always thought that was something for transmitting energy out of the stone. Like, why those nubs just don't make sense. So maybe that's a part of this sound technology. Keep going, Ricardo. This is, my mind's already being blown.
Nubs is Phil's territory, so I will.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
come back
totally.
to
We'll
him.
get to that.
But what I was trying to transmit is, for instance, when we look at India, and it was Phil that showed me this, there are thousands of temples with exquisite carvings on the stones, and some of the temples have the exact same images repeated again and again
Right.
and again. So how many workers, how many specialists did they have in working with stone? Because they must be the most part of the population in order to build all that. If you go through the rains that actually build those temples, it's all in 300, 400 years. So they had to have tens of thousands of people specialize in creating those stones, which is not true. They didn't have that amount of people. So there has to be another. I'm not saying this explains all of them. I'm just saying that this process may explain, if you find the exact tune to somewhat soften the structure of the atomic structure of the material you want to work on, then you can put it in a state where you can use it as you'd use clay. Even, for instance, if you have a mold of the thing that you are creating, you just smash it against the stone, you take it off, and you have a perfect sculpture. Because in the case of India, you have statues that are massive, that are one piece of stone, and you can pass a needle from one ear to the other. There is currents, chain links passed across the body, and all the chain links are made into the stone. How do you do that without breaking the stone? So all of these things made us think that there has to be an explanation, and sound seems to be the linking point, the key that combines all these hallmarks, everything from choosing the place on the ground from telluric energies, then constructing the structure according to archaeoastronomics. You create alignments because you know that those energies will be stronger if you connect the ground to the sky. So as below, so above, or as above, so below. Then you create the exact type of mineralogy that you want to, according to the functionalities you want to exert, because we know that from the sites that we tested, and we sure go into it, I hope you have the time.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see that they can heal, they can give you information through dreams, through ideas, they can bring you into a completely different place. And at the top and at the bottom, you have the feeling of awe, where still today, in places like, for instance, Alatri, it's a city, a complete city enclosed within a sonic bubble, a frequency bubble that reaches exactly the wall outside. And this is not me saying, this is the several papers that you have with teams, multidisciplinary teams that went there and studied this, where, like in Gorbarello Castle, you have 7 entrances directed to 7 astronomic points. They now have 8, or they used to be 6, and now they're 7 because they created one more that doesn't have that effect. But all of those, through sound that is emitting from the hypogeum into the tower, that now is a church, creates a bubble of sound that encompasses the city, that creates a hive mind that is established by everyone that goes through the gates. So even today, when you go and visit that city, you have to go through what Phil was saying, that is a magnetic vortex created by infrasound. And this is all documented. This is not woo. It was recorded on a camera. A camera is called a TR. So the car is a TRV. So the camera is TVR. That's how I memorized this thing.
Other way around. But yeah, you were right.
Yeah. So that camera, it's a normal camera that scientists change the internal sensitivity to detect magnetic fields. So it starts recording magnetic fields, and were amazed to see that on the Andros there are vortices of magnetism created by sound coming from the hypogeum transmitted by the tower, creates the bubble around the city. So everyone that goes through that gate, what they found from processing including the discipline of people that understand about how the brain works and so on, with those connectors to see the brain frequencies and so on, they discovered everyone that goes through the gate stays in that frequency that the gate gives them. So from that point on, they are on a hive mind.
What?
And if they use that hive mind, for instance, for meditation, as they did on the tests, they achieve such resonance with the site that the camera that knows what is that can see the stone because it doesn't have any magnetic fields on it. It's just black. The person goes exactly in tune with the site, and although he's seated on top of the stone, he disappears from the camera because he assumes the same frequency as the stone.
Wow.
This was also registered in New Grange with a camera outside filming a guy seated on the other end, and the guy simply disappeared when the sound was being introduced into the chamber. It only happens when the sound is introduced. If you don't put the sound, it doesn't happen. So the sound is the key.
So what's actually happening? So hold on one second. So what's actually happening when that resonance hits? That person that's in the field of view disappears because they are attaining the same frequency
They're
as
in
the
a
stone.
vortex, right?
Right? Are they just not
No,
there?
they don't disappear physically.
Right.
In the camera.
100%. What you're saying is on the camera, they disappear from the image.
Yes,
So
like the stone.
So their resonant frequency basically
Is exactly the same of the site itself. They are attuned at
That's
entrance.
so
And if you go, sorry, Phil, I will pass the word for you. So just a second. If you go into the church, so this is the middle. If you go to the extremes, if you go to the church, that church gives you an immediate sensation of communion with something higher than yourself. It gives you the experience of exhilaration of being in the presence of something divine, of something that it's clearly not coming from you. It's something outside that is involving you. It gives you a sensation of awesomeness, of magnificence, of whatever you want to call it. So this is testimonied by everyone that goes there, and that's why this team went there to test this. But if in the other way you want to use that same frequency to make your site, your location unconquerable, you find places like, I'm not going to it now, I'm going to let Phil talk, but we have to talk about the city of Gore, ancient city of Gore, and have to talk about Groparello that Phil already mentioned. And then you see that the effect of fear is highly effective, even if you have a million's army against a small city that doesn't have even 2 kilometers wide and no walls. So, but I will let Phil go introduce the nubs and the question that you were making to him. So,
I just wanted to.
I stopped talking.
I wanted to just piggyback real quick and just tell you that I experienced that same thing when I went to Stonehenge. I've told the story before. I've told a lot of people about this. I passed through a barrier that I could physically feel. It was an electromagnetic bubble that I walked through and instantly felt like I was being tuned to whatever. I just went from one reality to another, but it just really clicked. When you said that, that's what it made me. That's what I experienced at Stonehenge.
Do you remember the wind?
Mostly.
Do you remember the wind of that day?
Oh, I think it was pretty calm, actually.
No breeze?
Yeah, I don't, oh boy. I should have taken note of that.
Because the breeze from the correct point in Stonehenge produces a frequency of about 2 hertz. That it's infrasound and can create those emotions and can create the vortex, it can activate the site. Although Stonehenge probably is not the oldest site, as they say.
Yeah.
But it's still made so that it produced that effect because it has sarsen stones. It's like Phil said. The sarsen stone can go up to 99.5% pure crystal. So it's not a stone anymore. It's an actual crystal with 0.5% impurities, as you see in West Kennet Long Barrow. So, for instance, those sarsen stones are 99.5% pure crystal.
Amazing.
So,
all right, Phil.
If if you want to be very impressed with what happened at West Kennet Barrow, the scientist that wrote the paper on that place used a 14-year-old boy. He placed him inside the barrow, two people playing bull roarers on the outside. He shut his eyes. He said when he opened them and he looked around to the side, the stones were vibrating and he saw a portal open. And someone came and asked him if he was okay in that room. Now, he had no reason to lie about it.
Sure.
He had no reason at all. And he said he actually had 2 experience of it. So when he reported that back, when the paper writer had to report that, of course, and he was he did not believe in any of this whatsoever. So he did the experiment himself. Now, bear in mind, as an academic peer-reviewed writer, he knows what 1.75 meters is, which is the height of the barrow. He said when he did an experiment, he didn't want to do it like the young boy. He actually wore earphones. So it made the experiment slightly more diluted. He said he felt himself 4 meters above West Kennet Barrow, and he actually physically felt like he was above it. And then he came to the ground, and then he was absolutely fine. Like his frequency was attuned to the site completely, and he was fine, but he was too scared to see him get that portal open again, and he wouldn't give anything other than the actual report of what that young lad found in there, and hence why we want to go there and do that experiment again as soon as possible. And it's made all the hypogeums even more important on this research. If you look at the Cephalini hypogeum in Malta, it's called the Oracle Chamber for a reason, and it's been reported that when people are in there, and you can only be in there on your own while these sounds are occurring, that on the outside of that room, it sounds like a different language is being spoken. So only the oracle, the person, the shaman, whomever it may have been, engineer, leader going backwards, blue class, let's go back as many millions of years as you would like at this point, to who was using these engineering cultures. You've got Cappadocia that's got 22 levels. That could have been the biggest university in the world for all we know.
Right.
Of learning going backwards. We just simply don't know. And if there were portals or communications or devices of communication or rooms of learning that we could tap into right now using these hypogeums, and Rick alluded to Gropparello Castle, which is near Alatri actually, but a more singular version. And it's a castle that's got a hypogeum underneath it, which you're not actually allowed to go and see. Maybe us as an institute could get permissions to go and do testing. See if we can get, well, let me reverse there. On the reports and the papers from the academics from the hypogeum there, you've got what's called a trident of frequencies. These are infrasound frequencies, frequencies that you and I, people, humans, whatever, could hear. And you've got also other frequencies as well, which we think is a hidden frequency that could be used for awe, fear, whatever you may want to manipulate that site to. But let's be honest, and I'm digressing here from Gropparello, if you were using and you needed health benefits, your body, my body, they're tuned to a C and an F chord. So if you had a decent enough sound playing at that, you're automatically going to feel better around yourself walking anywhere around that castle. If it's in a G chord. What else happens on all the other chords through the ranges? So we want to go and do the experiments with every single note known to man playing at different levels. And this has been done with the likes of Bach orchestral music. And I think that these orchestral musicians, Shakespearean writers, mystery makers, you can call it conspiracy all you want, they might have known about this to a level and didn't want to tell anybody. And we're hiding these facts within their works, you know, and the physical evidence can't lie. Whether the written evidence can or not, whether those arguments are true or not, the physical evidence cannot. So Rick and I and a team of mine, you know, that have gone and written now a paper on the global hallmarks, the telluric energies, the mineralogies, and the magnetics that could have been used to activate these sites to why they could have been chosen. The original builds were placed at specific, well, you could call them ley lines of magnetic energy, but you can't just say that because ancient sites lie all over every single ley line. You've got to look at these original sites. Gropparello Castle was picked for an original site. In the middle of it, it's got what's labelled as a Roman, almost like an obelisk underneath it, but which originates on the actual mineralogy of the ground. Well, tests of that mineralogy indicate huge quartzite variables alongside these worldwide hypogeums that we're seeing everywhere that seem functional with water. So if we choose the sites to test with water that are there, then it seems to me these hypogeums will still be functional. And we can really go and use these sound tests to go and promote the feelings of awe, feelings of fear. Rick and I have spoken about this. It's not going to be for the faint-hearted. Obviously, writers have been very, very scared doing some of these experiments. Experiments have been done in the Great Pyramid using drums. The feeling of fear made these guys go away, and it's not been done again that we know of. So it needs to be done with an open mind, with the correct team of people that are using the right scientific research, that are using people that know exactly what they're doing. Di Bertolus, the paper writer of Gropparello and Alatri, he's actually got, these aren't, like Rick says, woohoo stories. This guy formulated a European and worldwide team, actually got a global, it's called an SRB or an SGRB, which means that his influence on anything archaeoacoustic testing, you have to use it. You have to use. It's the protocol behind archaeotestic acoustic. So we would go and ask for his permissions. So it's his testing that's promoted us to not write the paper. Obviously, the physical evidence was already there, but to add in, from ground up why these buildings used and incorporated said hallmarks. I think we're the only people globally now that offer an institute that could go and do the testing with us. And that's what we want to do, is to offer that opportunity to everyone,
I mean, I have not heard of anybody doing this kind of research, guys. Like, seriously, I've been waiting for somebody to focus on this because, there's a lot of people that have, maybe measured frequencies. This work isn't new, but, it's not, I don't think, done to the level that you guys are doing it. And also, Phil, if you can just give us a definition of what a hypergeum is, because, I know a little bit about them, but, maybe those of our listeners that don't really understand these places and how many there are, the really famous one I've always known of is the one in Malta that you guys already spoke about, but kind of break down, from an engineer's perspective, because, it's interesting that archaeologists want to talk about ley lines and telluric fields and how these are just falsehoods. They don't exist. There's no, the fact that these temples were built on these telluric fields and ley lines is just, it's irrelevant. So from an engineering perspective, I would trust someone like Phil, who is able to kind of wrap your head around it and do the correct research. But break us down from an engineer. What's a hypergeum and why it's so important that archaeologists have kind of looked over these sites?
I don't say looked over, because there's some very good work being done on them, but not enough. What are they? These are frequency orientated areas that have been used and made on specific sites by a set of engineers knowing exactly what they were doing. If you imagine a guitar when it's playing with specific chords, these rooms were designed, and you spoke about the hypogeum in Malta. The Cefalini hypogeum is limestone. That's a very individual case, because you have got others made out of individual mineralogies, but multiple subterranean level hypogeums are made out of encompassing mineralogies, i.e. a lot of quartzite. And quartzite promotes power. Now, the hypogeum Cefalini offers a specific, let's say, mystery of why it was built with just limestone. What we find at Malta is massive megalithic stones. We also find small pinch holes, which look like circular avenues. There's testing been done on these within the rooms of the hypogeum. And you can speak into them and hear in different rooms like you and I are talking now. And because of the mineralogies of the stones, where they're placed, they're acting like the string on the guitar. So when they're pushed together, these stones are almost acting like when you press the string as you're going up and playing the chord. So I'm talking now, you're hearing it through the speaker. They were doing the same thing and using it through mineralogies of stone, able to promote that sound over hypogeums around 200 meters, for argument's sake. Outside, they were hearing different things. Tunes of a C and an F chord might not have been what was going on in its original state, because there certainly wasn't loads of dead bodies buried at the hypogeum when it was built. That's happened over cargo cult times. So many different stories, so many different times. What if those handprints were the original people that were going and learning their lessons? What if there was a specific learning from another hypogeum's class, exactly what was going on? And if you could promote that through piezoelectrical, I know it's looking at it's not looking at a technology that we don't know. That's unfair. It's applying technologies that we do know in a different way. And piezoelectrical effects and frequencies aren't something that we don't know. We're speaking over vast distances now using exactly the same technology. They were just using it a different way. And if you were using water to promote that sound technology, imagine how far you could send said frequencies. A very long way, because it would promote across the waves. Now, when we've looked at different hypogeums, usually water is segregated into different ways going into it. If you were to stop that water, you stop the hypogeum. So the functionality on a lot of these places seemed, in my opinion, variable on the water. Not so much at the hypogeum at Malta, because it was surrounded by it. The sea was its functionality factor, maybe. And we don't know whether the sea underneath was its functionalizing factor. But many hypogeums, like the Gropparello Castle, require that running water. Did the pyramids need the same thing with the Nile? You know, 8.5 miles, 9 miles receded back now. Yep. But if we recede it back, did it need that? Did it require that to make it functional? You could look at the walls of Jericho. They didn't get broken down by armies. They got broken down by music. If you were able to use it as a very operating warring system to keep people away from your otherwise working civilization, you would.
Yeah.
It could be, you know, and that's what I think that we're trying to look at, whether these hypogeums were used as learning systems, which I think they could have been, like almost universities for the different rooms, could have been used for different ways. So mineralogies of stone, different rooms, different ways of learning. I hate to say it could have been multiple reasons. Do I think it's possible that using specific frequencies, you could have gone from one place to another using these magnetisms, these frequencies? It's a distinct possibility. And when we looked at the paper last week on Spaces, which I'll let Rick talk of, you will see exactly why he describes how he does it. And he appears over different periods of time and is spoken about by different cultures over, well,
500
years. And they're all saying this guy is just appearing within their culture whenever. So I don't know whether they knew exactly where they were going and what time they were going to. But the world he describes that he was going to and coming back to our world, well, it's not far different, is it, Rick?
No, not at all.
So wait, somebody was time traveling?
No, look, I think you know the name. Is Go on, Phil. Go on. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Carry on, mate.
He's very well known as John Preston, or Preston John or Presbyterian John. So he was supposedly the king of Preston John country. That was the reason why the Portuguese decided to go and look. Well, historians say they were looking for India, where in truth the documents actually say they were actually looking for John Preston's country, because it was a place of wonder. It was amidst Muslim territory, and it was keep resisting. And when we decided to dig a little bit more on it, because I found similarities between Preston John and what is the name of the fellow? I'm terrible with names, as I told you before. It's an European individual that did exactly the same thing during the Renaissance.
Nicholas Flamel?
No,
you're talking about. I got you. Hold on.
He has a noble title before his name.
Sir Francis Bacon.
No, Marquis.
Okay.
Marquis something.
Marquis de Sade.
Marquis de Sade, exactly. So it's something like that. It's not that, it's something like that. So this guy did exactly what John Preston did in the year 1000 onwards, because he was appearing. For instance, he interrupted, and this is on the court Historia, he interrupted a royal marriage to give counsel to the king, and the king actually stopped the marriage to receive the counsel. So who were these people that came all of a sudden, entering in any place without being seen, that they can come in and come out from these religious locations, from these sites? They gave their orders, and even kings, and in the case of John Preston, you have the Pope, you have several of the most powerful kings of the time trying to get into his favor, because if you go to the records, you see that, for instance, it was through him that Alexander the Great managed to keep the kingdom of Og and Magog and all those tribes of strange hominids apart from what today is the Great Wall of China. Because what it used to be, and what you see on ancient maps, is towers. These towers, and the letter says clearly that was the sounds that were produced by these towers that kept those enemies at bay. They couldn't get near them. So it's the same story again. That's how I found this, because I was looking for circular cities, the influence of sounds that make places unconquerable, as we found in Groparello. So what happens is you have these rooms that Phil described, that today are called hypogeums, and they call it that because they want us to believe that these were places for the dead and nothing else.
Right.
So, and people have these kind of experiences within them because the place is full of death, it reeks of death, and then we see the bones and see the decomposition. Because if you think about it, the whole Saflieni hypogeum, it was something that we don't see as natural today, because the first floor, the one that is exposed to the elements, it's where they dump the bodies and let them rot on the surface until they get to the bones. When there's nothing more than bones, they pick up the bones and they took it to the second level and store them there. And on the third level, you have actually what we know of the House of the Hypogeum, that is where is the oracle room that Phil was describing, and so on. So in the case of Groparello, you have the same technology with a different application, because what Bartolo found is that him and others and his teams, their teams, is that there is a frequency in Groparello that if activated, if transformed into a standing wave, and I explain what a standing wave is. A standing wave is, imagine you start producing a sound that is 2 hertz, 5 hertz, it doesn't matter, but you produce it in pulses. And because it's concentrated in walls, those pulses those waves start colliding with one another, and they gain certain momentum, they get compressed, and when they get compressed, instead of creating functions of healing and of feeling of awe, it starts producing the feeling of fear. So exactly as was used in a few wars, right, to this point by modern armies.
Sure.
What happens is when that tower starts to get the sound compressed, and they can do it at will within the so-called hypogeum, and then the tower will expand that sound and create that bubble. When that bubble reaches a certain limit, that in this case is exactly the walls that surround the structure, so you cannot go through those walls, because once you get in the influence of that bubble, who's inside is not, it's still not in the compressed wave. So they still got the good feeling. Those outside the bubble of protection, when the waves start to concentrate and becoming standing waves, those are going to feel disorientated, loss of limb control. This is all documented by today's researchers in lab. They have houses, sonic houses, where they test this on people. So you lose limb control. You get completely insane. Sometimes that's why Phil was saying it was dangerous, because we have in Orkney, we have the example of the Vikings that we know are the bravest of the ancient warriors, or at least we have them as such. And they had to spend the night. They were for a meeting with another king, and they had to stop due to a storm in Orkney Longbarrow. Is that it, Phil? Because I never remember the name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's at Newgrange. It was, wasn't it?
It's amazing.
So they had to stay there for the night. And that has the same configuration that we are finding on other places, that is the 4/3. And that implies not only the structure, the physical structure, but the sound as he is energized inside. So if you produce a note, you'll have the higher resonance in 4/3 of that note. So don't tell me it's coincidence, because it isn't. So what happened is they had to stay there for the night. And 2 of their men probably went to the wrong room, and they became insane, and they never recovered. So they were delayed. This was written in their catalog, because the wind entering the monument recreated the sound of the instruments, created the necessary resonance inside to create the standing waves where the place where they were. They became completely insane. Go on, Phil.
It's important to remember there that the weather conditions on the nighttime, and the reason that they stayed rather than progressed to the meeting was it was thunder, lightning, rain, wind, wind. And the reason we say this is over the multiple, let's say, thousands of papers that we've looked at over this. The wind and the conditions can actually activate these temples. It isn't just us going and manipulating the conditions. Certain people are more susceptible to certain ranges within their own frequency. Excuse me. So a specific person might say, well, I don't believe any of what you're saying. That's fine. But if you're in that room with that non-belief, it doesn't mean that the frequency in you isn't going to go, oh, I love it here. You could be the person that actually...
Oh, we lost Phil. That's all right.
He'll sure come back. I'll continue where we finished.
Yeah, no worries.
So, going back to what I was going to say and what Phil was describing is that we found out that there are 2 types of active locations, or that can be activated. Some of them can be at idle without us introducing any sound into it. For instance, you see the Tarxian temples on Malta, because they are on top of faults. They say that those faults create a constant, which I don't believe, but I think it's water, but they say that the faults create a constant infrasound frequency that goes up into the bottom of the Tarxian temple. That is 200 meters away from the Hal Saflieni hypogeum, and you don't detect this on the Hal Saflieni hypogeum. It doesn't have it. The Hal Saflieni is completely dead. If you don't introduce any frequency into it, you don't have any effect, because it doesn't have it on its own. It's incredible. And you go 200 meters away to the surface, you have the Tarxian temples, and that effect is not only felt, because you cannot hear infrasound, but you feel it. So let me put, if someone wants to go to the Tarxian temples and look at the stones, they will find that the stones are facing one another like a corridor, and those stones have dimples in them. So what these researchers decided to do was, I think it was merely by accident. I think they were passing through and put the hand on the dimples, or something like that happened, and he could feel something on the dimple, not on the stone, but on the dimple. So he decided to took the precise mechanism to measure what he was finding, what frequency was that, what kind of product he was getting from the stone, from the dimple. And he found out that each dimple like that is on those stones is like today's speaker on a stereo.
Mm-hmm.
So the sound comes exactly from the dimples. So you cannot go through that corridor to the main chamber without going through many of these frequency emitters that will tune you to get to that point and actually do what you have to do on the final room, on the terminal room.
Wow.
So
to actually back Rick up here, when you go to India and you look at the base of these temples, loads of nubs across the base, which academics say they're for lifting, not the base, they're not. At most Indian temples have got pillars that, and all of you will know, 300 pillar temples, all different tunes, all different notes. They are literally tuned to specific frequencies, these temples. Now, if we went there and was to do the testing alongside these, they've not been messed with. One thing Indian people do very well is they keep their temples completely original, and not a lot has been touched. It's absolutely perfect. So the testing there would be brilliant, like the Hypogeums, like the Maltese sites, very, very untouched. We've not moved loads of it around, which we've done in Egypt. That's, to be fair, it's a bit of a playground now. Compared to what it was in ancient times, it's nothing like it. Abu Simbel's moved, Philae temples moved. We've changed as much of it as we can for tourism. Blocks have been moved. The Sphinx is nothing like what it was in 1900. We could say this about every single ancient site, what's original, what isn't. We need to test the sites that are original. Let's make that very clear. So then we're getting an original reading from these Hypogeums and the hallmarks that we're promoting. And that's what will make this testing different to everybody else's. And that's why we've actually selected what we have to do our episodes on and so on and so forth. And likewise to do the paper on. And it's paramount that these telluric energies, these magnetics, these frequencies, the amplification of said hallmarks there are looked at in conjunction with these physical hallmarks that we're looking at in an A to Z of the temples worldwide. Then we might be able to get some answers, because on specific frequencies, we could get them and we could go in rooms and learn about them. Certainly that option there. And people might say there isn't. Well, there is, because the testing's been done. So academics have done that testing. We're taking that testing and going and using different frequencies and see if we can adapt different frequencies to maybe get different results, different conclusions, which I think we can.
Wow.
Finer tuning, just finer tuning, basically, because they get to the point, they get to the effects. They really activated the sites because of their mentality that all of this is supernatural. All of this is in the mind. It doesn't really exist. There is not one single of these individuals that thought, well, that kid actually saw a portal opening in a place where he's in complete darkness. First, he starts to see the stones vibrating. Then he sees a black circle opening. Then he sees the other room on the other side of the portal. So this is important. He actually sees the other side, and there is no other side. It's just a stone. And what the academic decide to do? To just put it there as some fancy idea that the boy received because the frequency was messing with his mind. Why aren't you testing this seriously? Why aren't you taking this serious? Let's put cameras on the chamber. Let's reproduce the effects. Let's see if the portal is for us, or for everybody. Is it real? Even if it's just for us, can I lift myself in an OBE kind of situation, actually go into the other room? Who was the person that for 2 times entered the division when the academic said that no one was there? And the boy said that by 2 times there was a person in there. So it's this kind of things that we wanted to push to the next level. Let's grab what's been done, and it's been well done, but it's not pushed forward where it's supposed to be. Because if the way I believe that when Arthur and Merlin were forced to go and search for the Grail. The Grail is not the Grail. The Grail is the actual knowledge to activate the temples, to heal the land after the event that happened. And you can go to my paper, 4000 BC, diluvial showers and terrestrial, diluvial waves and terrestrial showers, and you'll see that something happened when the impact of the Burckle crater in 4000 BC, when it happened in the Indic, that caused what we call the biblical flood. It was not alone. It had more free bolids with him. 2 went into the Pacific and 1 went into the Atlantic, just in front of where I live. That's why I live in the greatest floodplains outside the America, and I'm just in a very small country. Okay, the sediment is up to 300 feet high of sand. That's the sediment.
Yes,
the water was from that point above it.
Yes,
you see.
Randall Carlson talks about that in area in Portugal all the time. That's one of Randall's big things that he points to, and the place up in Seattle and upstate Washington, and then the place in Portugal that you're talking about. So there you go.
He inspired me several years ago. He still was on sacred geometry something by that time when he's giving those mini courses. Yeah. And I started thinking and thought that where I live, I cannot justify that with ice. He can on the America, but I didn't have the ice here to make this floodplain. So how did this floodplain happen? And so then I found the massive canyons in front of the major rivers. And those canyons cannot be formed while underwater. So the water of the ocean had to be removed in order to the water to come back into the ocean, creating those canyons, because they don't live long. You can't have those canyons for tens of thousands of years. They disappear by the movements of the waters. Right? That's why you have the greatest wave surfed in the world here in Portugal, in Nazaré. Because those canyons were caused by the water receding from the land and going back to the sea.
Wow.
Do you see my point? So the meteor that fall, or the comet part that fall in front of Portugal, send all of the water against the peninsula, Iberia Peninsula, that managed to go through the Tagus floodplains and so wherever, that was a big river. And when it's coming back, produced all that we see today. So I live in an area that is vast, completely plain, 0 meters above sea level, 0 meters, 4 kilometers and kilometers and kilometers and kilometers. That is divided only by mountains. That's where the waters baited against and then came back. Randall Carlson, a great shout out to him, because I learned a lot from him in this respect.
Amazing. And so part of that would have been Northern Africa, where, the Rickart structure and some of these things that, it looks like this concentric circles, and people are calling it Atlantis. Jimmy Corsetti, who drew a lot of attention to that. And you can see the salt in the
salt
desert
was caused by this
where it's
flooding.
Pulling, as it's receding backwards, it's leaving all this salt. So it just made me think that's very interesting.
Yeah, but let me tell you, you don't find only that on the Eye of the Sahara. So how many Atlantis are there? You see my point?
It's just one city.
You don't find, each time you find a circular city, you start saying it's Atlantis. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Because which one was Atlantis then? Because if you go to Spain, to near the Gibraltar Strait, you have an city exactly as it was described by Solon, by Sonsis of Sais, actually, to Solon the Elder, exactly as it was. So was that Atlantis, or was Atlantis really where it is the Azores Basin? Because that's the place that makes sense, not those. Those were settlements of the Atlanteans, I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
But they were not Atlantis. That's why you find the people that's called the Atalanteans in the mountains above the Eye of the Sahara. The Atlas Mountains, actually, that they give the name to, they were the refugees, because once they were separated from the nation had flooded, and they were the ones that were taking the salt out of the Eye of the Sahara and selling it to the Atharasians that controlled the traffic of salt at that point, selling it to the Romans. they were the descending public. In fact, it is described by the historians as a people that had no dreams because their past was so awful.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Their past was so awful. It's a community. They didn't have dreams. So it's all in the historical record. So yeah, that's why I digress here. We're not about Atlantis. We're not about Atlantis.
Amazing.
But we are finding we are finding remains of Atlantis, of that community, if you can call that they existed. We are finding those ports, those cities that make the connection to the mainland, not the Atlantis itself.
Right.
Because if you consider that the Azores Plain is placed in the conjunction of 3 continental plates, the American, the European, and the African. So what means is the effects of isostatic and eostatic movements on that place are increased in magnitudes of 5, 4, 10 even. When you had a bit of a ground going 1 meter up and down on a continental plate, on this where they meet, they can go 100 meters. You see, that's why what was Atlantis can be now actually at 1,500 meters below the ocean level, because the water's coming in, push the plates down, the continents grow up because they didn't have the ice on top. America is still rising today from the lack of the weight of the mile high of ice that it has.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I digressed this, but
no, that's all very interesting. Still,
it all works. It's all part of it, you know.
I think it's just part of your guys' bigger kind of vantage point where you're looking at things and pulling them together instead of going, well, it's just the pyramids here and it's just,
exactly.
Machu Picchu and Peru, and, keeping them all separate. That's kind of what has held it back, is what you're saying, is not looking at it globally and going, because it got me thinking when you were talking about the hypogeums, and I think Alexander transmitting his message earlier, I was thinking, can they do it globally? Is that why there are pyramids all around the world? Is there an ability to have a global network of communication? And was that one of the reasons it was established, to, hey, we're over here and in this country, this is what's happening to us right now? Like, I don't know. It's wild, like a early on internet type thing of getting messages.
Look, in 2 weeks, this week, we're going to make a space about the statement of significance. And that's exactly what it is. It is a statement of significance of these hallmarks, because that's what we have to understand. We are not trying to teach a lesson. We're not trying to say we are correct. We're just trying to say that these hallmarks that appear all over the world within the same engineering categories, the same examples repeated again and again and again everywhere, signify that there must have been a global culture or a culture with global influence all around the world.
Right.
That's why it's a statement of significance.
Yeah.
That's why the name of the paper is exactly that.
Very cool.
Yeah, and
we are trying to include everything.
And that's why you see the base of the pyramid is the same size as the circle in Newark, in the Newark earthwork.
Right.
These dimensions, we have a big circular earthwork that takes up a whole small city here in Ohio, and the dimensions are the exact dimensions of the base of the Great Pyramid. Why? And it all relates to basically the number and to the circumference of the Earth. So when you break it down into its smallest measurement, the circle of the Newark earthwork is a piece or a part of a measurement of the entire circumference of the Earth. It's like, what? So, were all these places connected, or was there some further civilization that had all this knowledge that then all these other civilizations, India, Inca, down in Mexico, the Maya, the Egyptians, or at one time, were they all communicating with these hypergeums?
Look, in the West Cannet, you have the long barrel and the short barrel. Okay, they are 200 meters apart, which means they are 656 feet apart from one another. In one of those chambers, you can speak. Just speak. You don't need to play an instrument. If you speak on one of those chambers, and this is recorded by academics, the sound will not be heard outside the long barrel. Okay, you cannot hear it outside. But if you go into the short barrel, the other one, smaller one, into the correct chamber, the sound will come up from the ground, bounce the ceiling, and come back to you. Wow. So it's two 200 meters away, it's 656 feet away. And by the way, 200 meters is a distance we are finding again and again and again, be it in Malta. So it's one of those distances.
Wow.
So what we think is there is a combination of stones underground, all connected from one side to the other, that reproduces the sound, because when you speak, the room is conceived in such a way that is bounced to the ceiling throws it to the ground, it goes through the stones and appears 656 feet away on the other chamber. When it's not listened, you cannot hear it on the outside between the distance, only in the chamber, okay? And no one makes a fuss about this. It just aligns on a paper.
Right. Right.
It just gets passed over.
Yeah. I mean, so many ancient sites align.
I mean, it's basically real life magic.
It's crazy. And I wanted to bring up something. And Phil, I don't know if you can speak to this, but when you guys were talking earlier about, the grooves in the stone, these kind of circular that mimic speakers, I had something that popped in my head was the cairn stones that I believe are either in Wales or in Ireland, where there's just miles of these freestanding stones. And some people call them the singing stones. And when the wind blows, they create this but they're definitely heading towards something, because the way they're all aligned, and it's just miles and miles of these things. They're just like, why would they put these stones upright? And it does seem like they're kind of have this jagged carved edge and these kind of circular. And I'm wondering, is this some kind of procession, or is this a similar kind of technology that we're talking about here? And I don't know if you guys know about those.
Yeah, we've heard of those stone placements, stone circles, ancient site placements. Rick's got, and I've got catalogues as well. But we started placing on the coastal lines where these ancient sites were, from Greece, Macedonia, all the way around the New Road, which the New Road, for those that don't know, goes all the way to India. You could go up over the Himalayas, which then goes into China, and then around into Russia. So you've got Gornaya Sharia, then you've got you'd come to the Tarim mummies, and then you'd come all the way to Yangshan, up over the top where there's the thousands of miles of where we've said how many stonemasons actually were there in India, because there were many. So these frequency-orientated hallmarks of mineralogy are prevalent across the road. Let's make that very clear. Were they able to pass these messages? It's an absolute yes for me, because the hallmark prevalent in absolutely every ancient site. What you're looking at when you're in these sites is they almost seem like they're oversized, absolutely enormous. You ask yourself the question, why was the doors this big?
Mm-hmm.
Why were the rooms this huge? Why are they domed? Why are they that shape? The why. Well, it's for sound. And if the bigger and the taller that building may or may not have been, the amplifications.
Oh, we lost Phil.
Okay, we lost him again.
Yeah,
but
no worries.
I can keep going from here. Have you ever heard, because these stones, Phil was talking about one of the uses that we can have of these placement stones, but you have ever heard about electroculture?
No.
Okay. Electroculture is something that appeared in books by natural philosophers in the early 900s. Okay, Phil, carry on.
Sorry about my speaker, guys. I'm having a minor meltdown with my technology here. God knows what's going on.
They don't want this out there, Phil. They don't want this out there.
You got some storms and things happening right now outside, so that maybe that's contributing.
Sorry about this. But no, we're seeing that the designs and the builds and the mineral from ground up, the magnetics, the vortexes that are used are prevalent through, the sound orientation, the amplification that we're hearing from them. It's not only controlling the people, but the earth itself, So when this technology was originally used, the engineers knew exactly what they were doing when they were placing these sites. So we marked down where they were. And funnily enough, these measurements, Rick, they're absolutely bang on, aren't they?
Absolutely.
You'd say to yourself, well, there's got to be another temple here. And there is. And then we'd mark, there's got to be another one here. And lo and behold, they're absolutely all the way around the new road on that line, not just on ley lines, specifically placed to where this would have passed the message and worked all the way around it. Now, that's something else. That's something else. And they're all on the coastal lines. What's prevalent on the coast? Water. It's constantly powering, isn't it, to the coast. Now, you're all talking earlier on, just while I keep a little bit of signal. You were speaking about Atlantis, which I'm not going to do. Look at Lemuria and Mu, the superpowers that would have been around. Let's look at the Ice Age. So when the Ice Age came down, we're looking at 11,750 years, give or take. So these cultures were before it. Look at the Game of Thrones that would have been going on back then. So you had the megafauna that would have been around. So buildings would have needed to be different because we would have got eaten. It's as simple as that. So buildings were very different, but we were still able to incorporate this kind of technology within it. So if there were different people around, and there were, so you had Denisovans, Aurignacian, you had Neanderthal, you had Paracan skull, you had ACH humans. The 11 or 12 that are documented within mainstream, we'll leave it at that before we go on to anything else. So they would have all been working really hard to get through that Ice Age. When we lost that water, what you guys didn't talk about is you would have lost land masses the sizes of, let's say, Europe and China. So what's our sea system would have been a river system. And those river systems would have been going to different, let's say, active sites that we're talking about right now that would have been positioned, that could have been of strengths of power, Lemuria, Mu, Atlantis, wherever. You know, the Hypogeums, the Acropolises of Greece. We could talk about India and its temples, Gornea, Sharia, whatever. Peru, the Coricancha. We could go North America, the parts of it that actually fell into the floor, Montana megaliths, everything that we could go into the mix right now. So the mineralogy of stones at this point in time is the most prevalent thing that would have been pulling power at that point. So Mother Earth, the magnetics, the ley lines are vital, not for every ancient site, for these specific sites that were carrying the power that could have been frequency orientated. Rick spoke earlier on about a stronghold. I'll let him speak about this, that Alexander the Great could not conquer. It was down the bottom of a valley. It was surrounded by mud buildings. He said, I will conquer this place. You know why Alexander the Great was capable of. I don't need to tell any of your audience that. Rick, what did they come up against with this technology that was in place?
Well, let me just say that imagine that you are the greatest commander of your time and you reach a valley where there is a little city that you can see down there from the top of the mountain. There's a small dot besides the river. And you decide to, okay, just go there and do your stuff. I won't even bother. So the problem is, time and time again, the warriors from Alexander couldn't reach the city. They just couldn't. They got there and got all
couldn't
crazy.
Get anywhere near.
Couldn't get near.
No, really?
Couldn't get near the city. Yeah, they couldn't get near. So the frustration was so big. And this is the historical fact that I'm going to give you now that's on history books. That is, he decided to flood the entire valley that is about, 200 times the size of the city. It's a huge, huge valley, okay? If you search for this ancient city of Gore, you will see it's a tiny, tiny city in a massive valley, okay? So he ordered to barricade the river, to flood the valley completely, because if I cannot conquer it, I will not leave this power around. So I have another point on this. That is, because he didn't try to get that power, which would have been very useful to Alexander, if he didn't try to get it, it's because he already knew it. That's why he didn't send his troops to go 15 times or 20 times. He realized what's going on. So he said, it's useless. While the system is working, we cannot reach it. So if I cannot get there, I will flood it and I will eliminate this type of resistance by flooding the area. So
and it also
drowned.
it also brought up the point, just to cut you off quickly, that if you look at Alexander the Great's power, 32 years old when he died, when he inherited his dad's army, he was just a boy. I'm ex-Marines, and believe you me, war is no picnic. Now, this guy managed to go worldwide, globally take over every power known to man in a couple of years. Now, did he? Or did he go to the superpowers of that area and say, I know how to functionalize these temples. I think I can make your people absolutely superb. Anyone causing you trouble right now, our lot will take them away. I'll just be your ruler, but I just want it to functionalize properly, because it said he went and functionalized every pagan temple along the New Road, Silk Road. And all he did was go and say, well, I don't want to take over, but I will do if I've got to. Could it just be misinterpreted? Because he did take over everywhere very quick. And it wasn't just I kicked the living you-know-what out of everyone. It wasn't that. He had a lot of people on his side globally. He went all over the world. Now, if he hadn't have died at 32 years old, could things have happened any differently? And those that knew around him the power, the functionality of these temples, you think if you had that power, and I'm just going to mention the word today, you know how churches are used. I'm not saying for the right or the wrong, and I'm not hitting on religion here, but if you hear a bell ring on a Sunday morning, you automatically walk to church. Is that not the church being functional? Yes, it is. So we're exactly right on what we're saying. But there was an old world before Christianity. So if you could play the old world tunes in the old world temples, is there not a functionality there? I think the answer is yes to that, and a resounding one at that.
Absolutely, wow. Absolutely.
Good point.
And yeah, and when we dig into this about the Alexander, we were surprised to see it confirmed so quickly, because when we did the study about Preston John, we found out that there is a relation between Alexander and Preston John that has already given service to Alexander to fight the land of Og and Magog. So Alexander knew what he was finding. He just decided to cover it up, and it was so for 600 years. 600 years later, another ruler decided to break the dams and rebuild the city, but the tower was still intact. So what happened is, in a matter of 2 years, without that many war campaigns, he was already controlling half of his country, and it was a huge nation. So in 2 years, without warring campaigns, with that technology, he managed to take hold of half of his country. He was not interested in the other half, otherwise he would have the other half also. So this is a software technology that actually works. And as Phil was talking about churches, just think about what is beneath the bell. What is beneath the bell?
A chamber.
It's a huge tower. Tower.
Yeah, that
hollow
goes down.
Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what we have been finding, and other people, not me particularly, but from other people, and Phil probably knows more about this than I do, is that the bells have all been changed.
I've been hearing this. I've heard this. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I know about. I know what you're talking about.
All of them.
Because the frequencies.
All of them.
Because the frequencies of those bells.
All of them.
Were exactly to do that, to create fervorous religious.
Right.
Because as soon as you hear the bell, you start feeling God.
Oh, here we go. Yep.
You see?
Time to get to church.
That's why people were so devoted, because these energies were still activated. Those songs from Bach that were created specifically for each one of the churches, or each one, if you go and see, each church has its own music created for that church.
Right.
For instance, at the very beginning of this research, one of the first things I encountered is a guy that tunes pipe organs in churches. And so that day he decided to take a recorder with him to record the music. Once the organ was tuned, he decided to let me record. I'm here, so let's take the opportunity. How many people have the opportunity to play in an empty church just for himself? And so he recorded the tune. When he got home, he discovered that either he didn't know how to play or the site was playing a tune on its own, because the church, with the introduction of the classical music made for that church that he was playing, was taking that tune, was resonating it, creating new harmonies, and created a new song completely independent of his own that was on the recording. So this ancient churches that replicate this technology of the past are alive. They can actually create sounds to influence you. For instance, in the 1930s, 1940s, there was a composer that decided to include emotion, physical emotion, to his performance, to his composition. So he decided to take an instrument that perhaps wasn't heard of since the times the walls of Jerusalem came down, and it's called an infragan. And an infragan is an 8-meter horn that produces a sound that no one can hear. Okay, we cannot hear it, but we can feel it. So he used it during the repetition of his music to create sensations on the audience, to increase the emotion of the notes that they can hear itself. It was never reproduced because the effects were perhaps too spectacular. So this technology, it was not forgotten. It was just ceased to be part of the public life. As you were speaking about those stones on the ground, there is something called electroculture that I was trying to explain. And so they discovered that if they created a mechanism capable of capturing the energy of the ether on the air. So it's like something like this that has various antennas in a single rod with various antennas on top and a large box. If people go and look for electroculture, we'll sure this is the image that will appear, or go into the book or contact me on Twitter and I send the material, as I do to everybody. So what these guys discovered, if they used the concept of as above, so below, if they managed to create something that united the forces of the air and the earth, because if you think about it, water and fire kill each other, but air and earth produce life.
Yep.
So by connecting those two things, they were able to create, for instance, tomatoes grew 200 to 300% faster. The seeds germinate almost with 100% success just by having that apparatus. And this is all documented from that time, all documented in academic works. So I immediately linked that to, you go to France and you see those 2-kilometer long or 1.6 miles long rows of menhirs and standing stones that perhaps were not just for one functionality, perhaps were not just to conduct the lines of information, of sound or whatever.
That's Karnak.
Karnak, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Phil. So they were there to fertilize the land, exactly as I was describing. You have here in Portugal places like the Cromlech of Almendres. You have many places with standing stones that were taken by farmers stupidly because they didn't know that was helping them to produce better results. So when this magnificent wave came above the land and destroyed these sites, they lost everything. They lost the animals, they lost the culture, they lost everything. So, and then came the Bronze Age. And then we see that genetically, there were invasions from the north that replaced 96% of the men. 96% of the men today are not Iberian, are descendants of these invaders.
Wow.
So the transformation that happened, you see exactly at that, I think this, people perhaps will not grasp how I think this is significant. It is exactly at that time that appear the first weapons or the first items, artifacts, whose only purpose is to kill another man. It has no other purpose, because if you think an arrow and a bow have multiple purposes, you can hunt with them, you can fish with them, and you can kill another. Yes, it's true, but it's done for surviving, not for killing. You have an axe, but the axe is also used to take down trees, to break knots, to do whatever things. The period in time where appeared the first artifact whose only purpose is to kill another human is on the Bronze Age. It's on the very brink of this 4000 BC when everything gets destroyed and it has to be rebuilt again. where these technologies are lost. When England became into a serious problem with food and so on, that caused Arthur, and in fact, it's not England, sorry, it's France, that caused Arthur and Merlin to go into the east to look for the answers where sites were not affected by this, because there were many places on the world that were not affected, to go there, get the secrets, because at that point they no longer knew how to revive these sites. So,
wow.
And you think they were not mythical people that were being written about? Because a lot of people kind of write off King Arthur and Merlin.
That's not what I'm saying. No.
I mean, I've always felt like they were based in some kind of. There's just too many things tied to
what you're looking at, right? You're looking at that the wrong way.
Yeah. Well,
look at it as an alchemical story.
Sure.
It's giving you evidence of exactly what happened. And that's more what it is.
Sure.
Look, Arthur's mentioned in British history, and it might not have even been like a million times. Let me mention another person, Ragnar in Viking, revered as a god. He was a man that walked with the people. He's revered as a god. I'm pagan. It doesn't mean he's a god. He's revered as one.
Yep.
Different stories, different interpretations, different ways of thinking. This is a really important one. The Merlin Arthur story is very important in its reading. But yeah, so is it real? Definitely a real story.
Yeah.
Based on real people.
Yeah, the names are irrelevant.
Events.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
The names are irrelevant. Yeah.
It's just so people know what I'm talking about, because we have to give some reference of what you're talking about. But now, the actual story, it's just a base that they were obviously not 3,000 years later. You're not expecting to hear the correct names and exactly what they went to do, and what they found and what they brought back. The only thing they can tell you is that they were looking for something magical. They retrieved it, they brought it back, and the land was healed. Yeah. So 3,000 years later, what you have is it's something that was used for described in completely different words, whose original meaning was perhaps lost, but the story is still there. They went fetch for something that the land needed to be healed. They found it, they brought it back, and they healed the land. So it's logical that the Vatican is going to call it the Holy Grail, because it's considered to be what gives eternal life and so on. But if you go to Pressing John, he had a whole fountain of youth in his country, and that's why he's only 32 years old. That's why you see the number 32 and all these actors dying at the age of 33. Or you find also the guy that I'm talking about here, that I still can't remember the name, but it's Marquis something. The guy also were 32 years old for 200 years. So,
and another thing as well within Preston John's world, where he can just walk through it at will to another area in this world. You know, we're seeing sort of mythical creatures that are actually within the stonework of certain buildings within Cambodia and India and so on. And you're like, wow, what are they? Is that a dragon? Is that a gargoyle? Well, I wonder what it is. It's got to be mythical. He actually speaks about our animals that we've got, but those free-flowing. You've got phoenixes, you've got all different animals that basically we are showing here. So is it possible that there's been multiple people like us that realise frequencies are prevalent, do the tests, go and get the answers? And let's be honest, humanity's not in a great state right at this point in time. It could really do with moving forward. Is that the politest way I could ever have put that? But Dead Sea Scrolls of engineering, the Grail, yeah, definitely. But I think experimentation scientifically to see whether functionality on a different level is copable is certainly something that we can go and do. It's not woohoo. Presented by academics, the reason we've come to these conclusions is not because we're just grabbing it out of thin air. It's thousands and thousands of academic hours within papers and their studies that we've written a paper on using physical evidence to actually come up with these theories. So, and you yourself have experienced them. So it's an honor to meet somebody that's experienced these feelings, especially in South America, you know, because we haven't actually met anybody physically that's had that in South America. So it's a pleasure to meet you and add you to the list of people that have had these feelings. You know, we could theoretically the site and use you as somebody, you know, and write a paper with you as a study point.
Study away. I'm your guy.
there's lots of things. For instance, I wrote a paper called I don't even remember the names of my papers. That's how bad I am with names. So it's dwellers of the East Sahara, something like that. I don't remember the name right now, but the point is, in my research led me, when I finished my research on Atlantis, not on the point of saying that Atlantis is here or there, but just following census of Sais to Solon, all that process, what references history has, what reference exists outside Plato, that's what I did. So that's what the paper consists of. But what I found is a passage that's saying that the Garmants, that is the people of North Africa, the ones that control the salt traffic from the Atarantians, that were the descendants of the Atlantans, that lived in the Atlas Mountains, the guys that didn't have dreams, okay? So you see, all connected, all things are connected. So the Garmants have a passage that says that they used 4-horse chariots to chase hominids, and they didn't manage to catch them because they run that fast. They needed the best 4 horses and the lightest of chariots to get to actually kill those semi-humans, because they didn't consider them humans. And then you have the academics bringing the word troglodytes, because it appears in old texts that around Africa there were certain tribes that were considered the troglodytes, that were basically civilizations. Anything wrong? Do you want me to?
No, I'd never heard of a troglodyte. I was just like looking for reference on Mikey if he knew what that was.
I have, and that's
go ahead.
Yeah.
So the troglodytes were an ancient kind of people considered by the 19th century. They called them troglodytes. It was a depreciating name for a different culture, because they caught moth and they eat insects and so on, and they look funny. They were very dark. Some communities of the East Africa. Okay, the problem is they cannot use this for these guys. These guys that live near the Garmantes are responsible for all the paintings that you see on the East Sahara. The pool of the swimming guys that you see, paintings of people swimming on those caves when you see a desert today. So it's a completely different time and a completely different environment in the Sahara at that point. It was full of water, completely green. What happened is, when the Garmantes appear and start hunting them, the environment has already changed. They are already struggling, and the Garmants are forcing them into their own communities of the caves, and they are starving, they are having multiple problems, and they are dying, and they are actually going extinct. But if you go to human skeletons and human morphologies of the past, you find that there is only one creature among hominids that could actually run that fast, because Homo erectus not only walked better than we do, he ran much faster than we do by their skeletal alone. So obviously, I tried to deduce if these guys were Homo erectus still living in the time of the Garmants, that is during the Roman period, in a small pocket area in the East Sahara amongst the rocks.
Why not?
Right? So
that makes total sense.
The paper is completely based on that, because there is no other hominid that could actually outrun a 4-horse chariot. We couldn't do that today. Not even the Bolt or whatever is guy from America. Yeah, there is no human that couldn't do that today, and for long periods of time. For long periods of time, because they could chase them for an hour.
Yeah,
and they could.
And I think early hominids, were living with humans way earlier than what we thought.
Absolutely.
Way earlier. I mean, I always give
We didn't go from one to another. We didn't go from one to another. We were all together.
I agree.
We were created for different purposes. Yeah. For different purposes. If you need a small guy that goes to a mine or to live in a small community, you create the Homo florensis. There's a very small guy.
I was just going to
very small needs.
Yep.
Right? If you need a very big man, very strong, you create a Denisovian or you create a Neanderthal.
Yeah.
So,
and if you want somebody to live in Russia in freezing cold conditions, you have gravity and take over the entire New Road, Himalayas. And then you meet up every 2,000 years outside India and you swap your children. You go to your individual areas. Neanderthal in 48,000 years are really struggling, so we're dying out. So when the Aurignacian and the Denisovian or Aurignacian and Neanderthal had the Gravitian, we knew the cold was coming. When the Gravitian are actually starting to really exist between 35,000 years and 12,000 years, where everyone's stuck at Göbekli Tepe and Karen Tepe and the Cataclysm. No, it was loads going on before that. This was a Game of Thrones with so many hominids, ACH humans, all sorts of different schools, megafauna going on, temples functional. And we knew what was coming. If it wasn't for the Gravitian and all these people learning for us, we wouldn't have made it and we wouldn't be here.
Right.
And we wouldn't have 5% Neanderthal DNA, or is it 2.2 in some people? But we've all got progressional DNA, but it's from specific different sets of genomes going backwards. I mean, at 800,000 years, you've got the ghost gene. Who was that? Just because we don't know who it is doesn't mean they're not in the mix.
Right.
I've written a timeline on my channel that's from 1 million years to now, and I won't move from that. And I'll sit at the end of that because DNA suggests it until everybody catches up from there. And how applicable technology when blue class was walking around with us, why was they blue class? Did they know in freezing cold times that they needed to hibernate? Had they synthesized snake venom? Is that why we see the snake serpent motif everywhere, globally, worldwide, in all stonework? Could they do that? Why did they have blue skin? Are the blue skin people now? Yes. Go on Google it right now. Are the blue skin people? Dude. Yes, there are. So actually, they could physically be in testing how to hibernate while we had freezing cold conditions at specific times. It's also said that at specific parts underneath the ice is a utopia of 24 degrees. Why couldn't we have been under that utopia? But what it did do was segregate multiple minds, let's say governments or superpowers. So when those ices started to melt, you imagine them bumping into each other, and Atlantis, Lemuria and Mu. Yes, they're not here, and yes, they've gone, but they were superpowers. And there was people that were around this world that were functionalizing these temples long before us. We've only been given a little bit of the jigsaw, but there's certainly enough of it that we can go and have a go at. I keep getting back to this and functionalizing them. And then it isn't all talk. Right. It's not all talk anymore. We can go and get the answers, in my opinion. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You touched on a lot there, Phil. We've had guests on that we've talked about the blue skin people. Our buddy VJ from India, who's researching connections of ancient Ohio earthworks and temples in India, and talking about, the seed banks that they would store on the top of the pyramid to grow massive, huge plants. And, there's thought that the Manitoba culture here in Ohio, that they were growing giant plants and bottling this mana and this energy. The gentleman named Ross Hamilton here in Ohio. So you guys have touched on so many things, so many overlaps, that it just keeps hitting me, one after another. But I think you guys are really plowing through a lot of these misnomers of, talking about telluric fields and energy and really breaking through in a scientific way of like, hey, like you said, this isn't woo-woo stuff. Right. Here's the data. And guys, all the links to the research paper, the institute and everything these guys are doing are going to be in the description. And I'd love to give you guys
if I may,
final words.
We are very proud that we think it's the first paper that has this. I'm hoping it is. Would like it is, because instead of the bibliography at the end of the paper that we always get in the end of the paper, and you get names and it's boring, I have to read them, I couldn't get them, I have to write it in a paper to then write it in the computer or look for it. So there is none of that. I included 300 files online direct on the bibliography. You just need to read a QR code with your phone or with the link. You press the link and you have immediate access to 300 files that are mentioned in the paper or used or contributed from. I selected from about 1,200. So there's 300 there that are immediately accessible and readable. So if you divide by folders exactly as I have in my computer, so it's divided by archaeoacoustics, mineralogy, telluric energy. It is all divided for people that wants to get the information just by analyzing the paper online or whatever. You can access directly the bibliography instead of just looking at names. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to plug that in.
No, that's exactly what I want everybody to know is you guys have connected so many dots. And when you were talking about other papers that you got into first to educate yourself, you know, where can people, if they really, some of our listeners dive super deep, and some of the people that we've had on the show would love to read your paper and understand where all this information is coming from. So I was going to ask that too, of links to all of the other things that you guys were looking into that kind of got you here. So thank you for that. Phil, final words from you, sir. You guys have been amazing. I want to give you guys the floor just to, again, let everybody know where we can connect with you, where we can find you, and we will start putting this baby to bed. It's been an incredible episode.
Sure, thank you.
Well, first I'd like to say it's an absolute honor to have met you guys. To be involved with such a huge podcast and a following like your audience, what a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having us first and foremost. It's an absolute pleasure. So thank you. And I wish you guys all the very best. And you're always welcome to come and interview with us. We do Spaces live on a Sunday evening at 9:00 GMT time. And we're going to be doing live YouTubes very shortly. We have a channel. We're still getting to grips with OBS software and transferals of Zoom to such, so a little bit novice in that respect. I've got Ancient Alternative View, but we actually, Rick and I, run the Institute for Natural Philosophy together, which is on academia.edu. We've got a YouTube channel. We run a Twitter page, as I do individually, Ancient Alternative View. Ricardo Calvário does. And we do as an Institute for Natural Philosophy, where you're all welcome to come and get involved. We will be, and shortly, we have a shop linked to our Twitter and on our website that will be coming out shortly. And our hope with the Institute is that when it's run as a charity, that people like you guys out there, we don't want to be throwing huge price tags on coming and looking at an ancient site. That's not what we're about. The truth is what we're about. And we want the right people for the right expedition. So it's skill sets initially that we're looking for. So in adaptation to the Institute, we'd love everybody with a specific skill set that might think they could come and help with the archaeoacoustics, the magnetics, the mineralogy, applying this to, frequencies and how they might apply to these ancient sites and how they could help us. We're open to all researchers, to everybody's opinion, and that's what we do. And it's been an absolute pleasure to come here. So thanks ever so much for having me, and thanks for having Ricardo and the Institute with you guys today.
Absolutely. And thank you, Phil.
It was a blast.
And Ricardo, any last words from you as well?
Yeah.
Sure.
I want to absolutely give you the floor.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having us. It was a huge pleasure. It was very fun. And that's how discussing science should be, fun. So many thanks for that. In regards to our store, I just wanted to say that we are now about to launch the library part of the Institute. So we've seen that there are some people, very few, but there are some people that are grabbing ancient books that we can only see behind a wall on a museum and so on. Because I have those books scanned from the original, we are going to reproduce some of those books exactly as they are, from cover to back cover, exactly as they are originally, with a certificate of certificate of originality attached to it, in very low price, because we manage our creative George has a store, the Yorgos Designs. He has been wonderful working with us. He never took a cent from us. He's working hard to make this happen. And we already have 2 books that are almost ready to be on sale. There are alchemical books. One is from 1500s, the other is from 1600s. They are both from the Dresden Library, which you cannot access. It's behind a wall, glass wall. You cannot see it otherwise, but for the distance, and you can have it there on your home exactly as it is in the library, either for studying or for just decoration, whatever you want to do with it. Because there are people doing this, but they are doing interpretations of the books. We are giving the books exactly as they are.
Let's make this very clear. The proceeds that we get from things like this within the Institute, we're going to have academic classes where you can earn, as somebody that might be a little bit more underprivileged or doesn't get to go to university or get that college degree, you can come and get a diploma of learning with an institute that could potentially then come away on expeditions for more or less privileged learners that might have a skill set that's through the roof. And this comes from a vet that's really struggled after leaving the services, but the ancient world's been my place to actually come back and resetting a historical degree and now rewriting the historical past through physical evidence and going and doing experiments. I feel that as a charity and as a trust where free thinkers can come and have a place to actually get their heads together and come and travel with experienced research within a team environment. I'm a Marine, I'm a swim instructor, I'm a teacher of children as well on martial arts, I'm a second-hand black belt. So in kickboxing and in Muay Thai, so let me make that clear. So our team has got skill sets that allow us to take people on expeditions. We've been there, we've done it, and we've seen it before, but we want people that can add to that. And we're humble enough to know that everyone can add to that. Absolutely. Right. Everybody. It doesn't matter what degrees you've got. Knowledge is knowledge, and knowledge is key. A young girl or a young man could come up to us, and that one word might make all the difference. And let's be fair, young kids and young adults at the moment know technology far better than we do. Oh, yeah. So it would be fantastic. Well, my kids certainly do. So it'd be fantastic to incorporate. Our point is everybody's mindset. Families worldwide can come with us and come to the Institute and feel that they can learn. It's not us taking money for us. This is a charity institute. Yes, automatically we're going to be going. So, of course, we're going to earn a wage from it. But this is so other people get the benefit of an institute and us going around the world and actually giving speeches, talks with people like yourself that we meet along the way. And then we can get communities involved, and we can go and do testing together and get people involved in the frequencies, the amplification of the magnetics, the ancient sites. And kids absolutely love ancient sites, and it gets people out again rather than stuck inside. And that's what the Institute's all about, you know. So
very cool.
Absolutely.
And honestly, that might be the most favorite thing that I've heard today, is that right there of you guys giving back to basically educating people, getting people proper education, even if they might not be able to go to an academic university. You guys are offering something really special. I don't know anybody that's doing that. And I think, you know, you're set right now with what you guys are trying to do to really change the consciousness of humanity, period. Because if you start getting people out to these ancient sites and turning these things, you always hear, hey, we need to turn these ancient sites back on. Well, it's hard to understand what that means. But this is a way to actually start, you know, raising the vibration of people on the planet slowly.
Physically doing it.
Exactly. That hive mind again through frequency could turn around really quickly. Yeah. And let's be honest, people aren't just asleep anymore. People want to learn.
Yes.
They're out there and they want to learn. They really do. Yep. And I think it's important for children to learn early. There's a vast array to our ancient world, not just one thing. there's so much out there, and now we've got the chance to go and show it them. I think that we've got every chance to do it. We should,
I'm with you, man. This is great.
Thank you.
And that's why we don't have a Patreon. We don't accept donations unless it's from a corporation that has a specific purpose for that. So that's why we don't just have a store, because we want to have people to have something back for their money. Our prices are almost at the production cost. So it's just a little interface so that people have access to things. We have some access to money because obviously we'll need money to take people for free, to dig the teachings. So we are doing our best with the little that we have so far, but we are stretching it to whatever we can do. So we probably will do a small one-day conference in the next months. We haven't settled it yet, but that's perhaps our next step. And then starting to organize the visits to the sites, because that's what we intend, is to go to the sites and to research them from the point that they were left behind.
Amazing.
So get in, see what we do, and if you like what we do, just reach out and let me know what you think, what your ideas, your concepts, which way you can help us, because I think it's important that the teacher always reminds that the student never dies. He cannot be a student without being, cannot be a teacher without being a student. So we shouldn't forget that. And most people that are teaching forget that they are students also. They don't have anything to hear. So we have everything to hear. So bring it on.
Some of the teachers that have taken on with Institute, let's make this very clear, they're PhD academics. One of them's from America. She's taught in multiple universities, has multiple links from teachers over there. So we've already got somebody like a Dumbledore that can actually look after teachers. Rick and I will be doing classes online. And the skill sets around our team, but likewise out there, your guys, listeners, and ours on our channels that we meet and we'll bring into the Institute. And if these guys want to do courses within their own academic learning for people, then we welcome that as well. But that's what the Institute is all about, bringing the teaching back to these students. Sorry to have taken your time.
Oh, God,
but,
no problem.
No, we want to give you guys enough time to really get everything you want to talk about. We're in no rush at all.
Look, just think about it. You can only learn from those you disagree with.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true.
It's so
true. Right? Because those who agree with don't teach you anything.
We've welcomed everybody and placed our work out there for free. We're asking nobody for anything. It's on academia. You can download it for free. My catalogues are on Pinterest, Ancient Alternative View. All hallmarks are on there. You don't have to pay a penny. All labelled. So we're asking for nothing off anybody. I've never earned a penny on Ancient Alternative View. I'm alternative as they come. This isn't what it's about. We all need to work together looking above mainstream and alternative. And this is about peer-reviewed academic papers giving us data that are telling us this can happen. So I don't really care who's against that. I think we've got enough data to go and do it. So I can back myself on that, being a researcher that I am, with the right people around me, and we can go and try it and see if we're right. And I think the data, 300 papers as a bibliography on a barcode says it all. We could have added more.
Wow.
We could have added more.
Wow. Incredible, gentlemen. Again, thank you so very much.
Fantastic.
Amazing stuff. I mean, we went here, left, right turn, and we're right back around where we need to be. And if you guys stick around, Bub and I are going to outro the show, do a couple shout outs, but we'll come back and give you guys a proper goodbye. Wow. Absolutely. Amazing. Ricardo and Phil, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you
guys
very
are
much.
The best. Wow. Whew. That was
a little bit to digest there. We got a creative crafter in the room.
Oh my God, she just won't stop.
Ripping up something back there.
She's got her headphones on too. Jesus. Okay. Guys, that was unbelievable episode.
Yeah, my mind's fully blown.
Like I said, I was so thrilled for this episode, just from the little bit that Ricardo was sending me, and I was trying to tell. He's like, I'm sorry, I don't want to bore you with this. I'm like, dude,
you're not boring me.
Not boring. This is my wheelhouse of wheelhouses. This is the stuff that I've felt, that I've wondered about. I've been obsessed with sound, ancient civilizations, having a Mel on with doing her sound healing and the crystal bowls and the singing and all the things that she's been doing. Like every other episode is about sound, I feel like, anymore. It's just the tape. It's tape being pulled apart. Hey. Oh, whatever.
It's not going to matter. We got like 2 more minutes and we'll be done.
But you guys can find us on all the social media platforms at The Strange Road. And also Discord. The Discord server is popping. Go in there and hang out. Also, guys, we have the Facebook group is popping. Don't forget about the Strange Road merch portal, thestrangeroadmerch.com. We do have some new designs that we were kicking at Frogman Fest. We're going to try to get those up potentially. If you guys like the new merch, these t-shirts, hit me up, DM me, join the Discord and pop me a message in there. We can always take orders through, PayPal or anything else. So we appreciate each and every one of you guys. Oh, and YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Much love, peace, and love.
Later, everybody.